I'm 57 years old, and this is the first time I've ever said something like this out loud. Not because I didn't feel it before, but because men like me are taught that some thoughts should stay private, quiet, locked away where they don't interfere with getting up the next morning and doing what needs to be done. For most of my life, I didn't question my place in the world. I knew exactly who I was. I was the guy who showed up early, the guy who didn't complain, the guy who built things, fixed things, carried weight. My value was simple, clear, measurable. And then one day, without any warning, that framework disappeared. I didn't lose my job in a dramatic way. There was no argument, no shouting, no scandal, just a meeting, a calm voice, words like restructuring and moving in a new direction. I nodded. I thanked them. I shook hands. I even smiled. That's the thing people don't talk about, how trained you become to perform stability, even when something inside you collapses. I had worked in the same industry for over 3 decades. My hands knew the motions without my brain catching up. My mornings were automatic. Alarm, coffee, keys, door. Work wasn't just how I paid my bills, it was how I understood myself. Without it, the days stretched out in ways I wasn't prepared for. The first few weeks felt almost like a vacation. People told me to enjoy the break, to rest, to finally relax. I tried, but rest feels different when it's chosen versus when it's imposed. There's a strange silence that comes with being suddenly unnecessary. Emails stop, calls slow down, conversations change tone. People ask how you're doing instead of what you're working on. And slowly you realize that the world keeps moving just fine without your participation. Mornings became the hardest. I'd wake up at the same time out of habit, sit on the edge of the bed, and feel this dull confusion settle in my chest. Where was I supposed to go? I started filling my days with small tasks, things that looked productive but didn't really require me, cleaning things that weren't dirty, fixing things that weren't broken, just to feel useful. That word followed me everywhere. Useful. When you're a man my age, usefulness is often the last identity you're allowed to have without explanation. I noticed how uncomfortable people got when I didn't know what came next. Friends would suggest hobbies, volunteering, finding myself. They meant well. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't searching for joy. I was searching for relevance. There's a moment that stays with me. I was standing in line at a hardware store holding something I didn't actually need when the cashier asked me casually, "So, what do you do?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't know how to answer that question without shrinking. I mumbled something vague, retired, between things. He nodded and moved on. I stood there longer than necessary, realizing how much of my identity had been tied to a sentence I could no longer say. I didn't feel depressed in the way people expect. I felt erased. There's a quiet humiliation in becoming invisible after being relied on for so long. No one warns you that aging doesn't just change your body, it changes how the world looks at you, how much patience it has, how quickly it moves past you. I started doubting myself in ways I never had before, questioning whether my experience still mattered, whether my skills were outdated, whether I had already given everything I had to give. And the worst part, I felt guilty for feeling this way. I told myself I should be grateful. I had worked, I had provided, I had done what I was supposed to do. But gratitude doesn't erase grief, and this was grief, for a version of myself that no longer had a place. What finally brought me here wasn't a breakdown. It was a quiet afternoon. I was sitting at home watching the light move across the wall when it hit me how rarely anyone asked for my opinion anymore, how little my absence disrupted anything. And instead of panic, I felt something else. Sadness. Honest, clean sadness. The kind that doesn't ask to be fixed immediately. I don't have a grand reinvention story. No sudden passion, no bold new chapter. What I have is awareness. I'm learning that my worth can't be tied only to productivity, that being alive doesn't require justification, that presence alone has value, even when it isn't efficient or impressive. Maybe it's about unlearning the idea that we were only ever valuable for what we produced. If you're listening to this and feeling the same quiet displacement, I want you to know you didn't disappear. The world just forgot how to slow down long enough to see you. And telling this, even here, even now, is my way of reminding myself that I still exist.